All right, I'll call to order the May 15th, 2017 meeting of the Arlington Redevelopment Board, being recorded by ACMI. First on our agenda this evening is a continued discussion about a letter we received April 12th from Madeline Astor on behalf of the Alewife and North Cambridge neighborhoods regarding development at 195 and 211 Concord Turnpike. Excuse me. We've received some additional information on the project, and so Jenny, I don't know if you could quickly just update everybody on what's been provided, if you all had a chance to go through it.
Sure. What's been provided was a what turned into a public records request, which was just for the abutters list for the city of Cambridge. It's many, many pages. And then the decision that the planning board in the city of Cambridge made for 185 and 211 Concord Turnpike. And then just two other items which are listed as correspondence. One is a letter from Jennifer Ryan, the president of Arlington Land Trust, and the other one is a memorandum from the Transportation Advisory Committee. Those are in the back of your packets.
Okay.
So those are the new pieces.
So what I took from this is TAC actually reviewed the traffic impact study that was done by, or done for the project at Alewife.
That's right.
And they agreed with its findings, more or less.
And Laura coordinated this with TAC, so she may be
Can
able to
you
answer additional questions
answer
if
any
anybody
questions
has
or
any.
Yes,
give some
sure,
insight into
yeah.
what they did as their process?
I was expecting Howard Muse, the chair, to be here tonight. I don't know if he forgot or if he's on his way. I texted him, but I haven't heard back. Yeah, they did review the traffic study. There was a subcommittee of about 4 or 5 people. And they did agree with the findings of the developer's traffic study and the City of Cambridge's review memo. I think the basic premise is that they've based all of their traffic estimates on the Voxon 2, which is right next door. And they found that that there were many fewer trips than there were vehicle trips than there were residents, because so many people use the T or ride bikes or walk to their destination. And the Transportation Advisory Committee concurred with those conclusions. I think the only thing they were certainly wondering about was there didn't seem to be any specific recommendations for what happens if traffic exceeded the estimates, and so we could, if we wanted to, correspond with the City of Cambridge to see how they would deal with that situation.
Okay, but they did note that there would be little direct impact on traffic in Arlington.
Yes.
Specifically.
Since all the traffic has to go inbound, by the time that people would come out to Lake Street, it would be much more dispersed and going in a lot of different directions.
Okay, and then just also in here is, they did talk about the TDM measures, transportation demand management measures that were in the Cambridge decision we also received, and they found those acceptable.
Yes.
Actually, I thought that was a pretty well thought out
Yeah.
portion of that decision. I was impressed by
Very
that.
aggressive, you could even say.
Yeah, some things we can lift for future projects here, possibly. Does anyone else have any questions for Laura or Jenny about what we've seen, what we've talked about, and what we might want to do here, what we can do? Ken?
There was some question that, were we, as an abutter, notified during this process, or that,
We were notified,
so.
according to the abutters list, yes.
So there's nothing we can use as that? Okay.
That is not material here.
Okay.
So we were notified.
So does that procedurally impact our ability to appeal, since we didn't participate in the original comment period?
No, I don't believe so.
I don't believe so. I think as a party in interest, if we so chose, that wouldn't limit us to any appeal.
That's my only question right now.
Okay. Andy?
I agree we should ask them to send a letter to ask what additional measures to mitigate the project. It would just be interesting to know that.
David? Anything?
I guess, I don't know if there's anyone here, in the audience even, who could speak to, some of the, wetlands issues that, I saw in some of the letters, but that were apparently, not considered relevant, by Cambridge.
Jamie, do you know?
Do I know if anybody is here?
Well, do you,
Well,
have we got
I-
any input from
Yeah, is there-
that,
No,
aside from?
Because there's
We
a,
did not
interested
receive
parties.
into
there's
that
kind of
one.
a little bit of a mismatch between the Cambridge's findings and some of the concerns that have been expressed.
Right, and one of the things that I didn't see in this package that, and I looked on, I did try to find it quickly, but ran out of time, was what exactly is in the order of conditions from the Cambridge Comcom. And I wonder whether the Arlington Comcom has been asked to look at this at all.
They were not asked to look at this, no.
Gene?
I have a few questions and a few observations. I'm sorry that Howard, how's he pronounce his last name? Muse isn't here. If he comes, I would like to ask him some questions. I spent a lot of time reading the transportation piece, and I think there are some things that I don't quite understand. Let me just take the memo from Howard. It says, we found there'll be little direct impact on traffic in Arlington, and then they talk about congestion at Route 2, Life Brook Parkway, Mass Ave, Life Brook Parkway. Traffic returning to the site from the east will impact Lake Street ramps. They didn't talk about in here, well, they do talk about pedestrians and cyclists crossing the south side, which will slow traffic that goes into Life, and that is one of the major impediments on traffic getting into Life. I don't think they mention that anybody who lives there, who drives, who's going west on Route 2, will also take that road to go around to head west. So I wasn't so happy with what the Transportation Advisory Committee did, and maybe if Howard came and I'd have a chance to talk to him, I would understand some of those impacts. I also didn't see a direct correlation between some of the mitigation, traffic mitigation, and some of these impacts. For example, there's no mitigation for all of the delays going into Life caused by the increased pedestrian and bicycle traffic that's going to have to cross the access road into Life, at least that I saw. There are things that I like that makes it more attractive for people to go to Life, but there's nothing that talks about how do you mitigate the fact that many more people are going to be crossing that road and biking across that road. And I don't know if there's a mitigation that makes any sense, but it didn't seem to come up at all. And while that may not affect traffic in Arlington, it will definitely affect a lot of Arlington traffic, both the people who take the bus to get to Life, and I do that sometimes, and the bus can wait a long time on that queue. And they talk about, in the mitigation, looking at the possibility of having another lane, but not actually doing anything about it. And I think they found some study, but not doing anything about it. So that will affect people who take the bus from Arlington into Life. It'll affect people who drive from Arlington into Life. And it will, yeah, they have a lot of nice traffic mitigation, and I think that's all good, but I don't think they dealt with some of the real impacts of the traffic. So I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Well,
Howard's gonna come. He did forget, but he's on his way now,
Did-
so he'll be in about 15 minutes.
Can I say one other thing?
Well, it
before
was
you go?
related to your
Okay,
comment.
okay.
Did Cambridge actually make any findings as to whether there would be any traffic impacts from the increased bicycle and pedestrian crossings from the
I
project.
don't remember if they did. I know that TAC did, which I thought was a very good sort of observation on TAC's part. I don't remember if Cambridge did or not. So those, those are my concerns, basically, about it, on the traffic side. On the wetland side, I actually thought that the mitigation they proposed was pretty good, from raising the height of the building, so it would be 1 foot above what they anticipated the 2070 flood would be, taking into account climate change. I thought that was pretty good, if I understood it correctly. They talked about retaining stormwater on site, which I think the site doesn't do very well now. So it looked to me, from at least what I could read and hear, that they did a pretty good job on that part of it. But I didn't get to read the entire proposal, just the planning board decision. The other thing is, I think the planning board issued its decision, so we only have a few days after today if we intend to file in, land court, I guess, or Superior, one or the other, if we wanted to ask. I'll just make one other observation. Cambridge mentioned the facility having to go to Mass DOT to get a wider sort of driveway or access off Route 2 because it's a little bit too narrow. And I wonder whether the facilities can ride on whatever curb cut permit had been given to the facility before, or if they have to go back for a brand new curb cut permit, because it made sense from what I read that they would want a wider curb cut for a lot of really good safety reasons. It sort of wasn't clear to me about whether they get to keep the old one or whether they would have to start from scratch on it, because if they would have to start from scratch, I think there may be some, arguments about it's an inappropriate place to have so much traffic going in and out, but I don't know.
I can answer that question.
Go ahead.
I did look into that a little bit, okay?
Okay,
And I think they weren't asking for a curb cut, to my understanding, okay?
right, I know.
They're asking for a deceleration lane. So when you were coming down Route 2, there was enough pullover so you can slow down enough, so when you make that right turn in, you're not doing it at a higher speed.
Yeah.
That's what I thought they were asking for. They weren't asking for any curb cut.
Well, they're asking for a larger curb cut than they have now.
That's not how I read it. I may have read it incorrectly then.
Let me see,
I thought they were just asking for a wider
It's on page
lane.
16 of 28.
David has this well marked here. Yeah, David is right. The wider driveways for access and egress ensure better traffic safety, yada, yada, yada. Subject to review and approval by MassDOT. But what I don't know is whether, you need a curb cut permit to access a state highway, and I really don't know whether they can ride on the permit or get grandfathered into whatever Lanes and Games had, or whether they need to go back to MassDOT and say, we need one. And if they don't get one, they can't build. I just don't know that.
I would guess that review and approval means that they need to go
I
back.
think they do need to go back and
Over.
forth.
Well, whether it's to a wider one, or whether they
Or
could
any
keep the narrow
revision to the
one.
existing one.
Yeah, I don't know the answer.
I would think they would need to go back, if they intend to go beyond what's already allowed, they need to go to DOT
Yeah,
to
see-
expand it, or to alter it.
See, I don't know if the permit sort of lives forever, or if when there's a new owner and a new development, they have to go back and start over again.
Yeah,
Do you know?
I think it goes with the land. I
Does
think
it?
if it's there, it's there.
Yes,
They
I
can
don't
use
know.
it.
That's possible, I don't know.
Mr. Chairman, would you like the public to wait till you're finished
Yes,
with the
please.
discussion?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Also, do we know if we actually ever got notice? Because all we saw was the list of abutters.
They're showing that they gave us notice, and our Arlington Planning Board is listed in here,
I know,
in the list of abutters.
right, I know, but did we ever get notice? Do we know?
That would be the flag that we received notice, yes. So yes, we received notice, that was my answer earlier. So that's the answer.
So we do have Howard coming, he said in about 15 minutes.
Well, he didn't
Do
actually
you wanna
respond.
move
I
this
asked him.
around,
Yeah.
or?
I think what I'm gonna do, and I will allow, I guess I'll allow for some questions after the fact, but I think I'll table this discussion for now, because it seems like we've hit a point where we can use him, and move on to, we'll table item 1, the agenda, move on to the central school lease space, because I don't think that'll take very much time. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that now. So anybody who's still here for the Lanes and Games discussion, stick around, but
Now, I'd like to address many of the issues.
you'll get your
that were
chance.
raised. Thank you.
You'll get your chance. So we have Linda Shoemaker here from the ACA, so Linda, come on up, have a seat. Thank you. This lease has been negotiated heavily for several months now. But it's in front of us, so I'm excited about that. Could you tell us where things stand on your end?
Sure,
Fundraising.
absolutely, yeah. Thank you. So I think I was last here in January, and I don't know that we've met
No,
yet.
we haven't.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. And since that time, things have been moving along really well. We've engaged, our architect firm is Johnson Roberts Associates from Somerville. And the lead architect on the project is an Arlington architect, which we're really excited about. And they have developed the initial schematic designs. And we are about to sit down with Jenny and the building inspector and the facilities department and others to review and make sure that everything is the way we want it before we share that with you guys. But
That's part of the next phase of renovation, sorry. There's a central school building committee that's related to the senior center, the second and the ground floor and the first floor. That's a separate
It's a separate
committee,
issue.
sorry.
right.
Just wondering, that's all.
That, yeah,
I appreciate it.
thank you. And we confront that a lot as we're talking to people in town about this, because those two projects are both coming. But we're excited that on the third and fourth floor, designs are gonna be adding some really terrific community space for Arlington. There'll be classrooms, probably 5 classrooms of space, a sizable gallery with a performance space built in, and some, I think, inviting and needed additional community gathering space for Arlington. So we're excited about that. The fundraising is proceeding well. Our goal was to hit the $300,000 mark by the end of June, and we're very optimistic that we're gonna get there. We're in the middle right now, this month, of a $25,000 matching opportunity. There's an anonymous donor who put up $25,000, and if we can raise that by the end of May, they're gonna match $25,000, and we're quite close to that. So things are proceeding well, and in terms of our timeline, we're moving out of the Gibbs next month. We're moving into the high school for the summer, where we'll be running our summer camp program. And then in the fall, we are seeking temporary space while the renovation proceeds on the third and fourth floors. And it looks like the timeline will put us at completion of the renovation in February 2018.
Jenny, is there any update? I don't think there were any substantive changes to the lease since the last time we saw a draft.
No, the only change is maybe a lowered amount of parking spaces. That is actually the biggest change to this lease. And I guess the other substantial change is that the lease commencement date is actually September 1st, not July 1st.
Okay.
Because of, as Linda suggested, they're gonna be at the high school for July and
Okay.
running their programs. So we need the lease to start on September 1st. We will be putting together some sort of addendum to allow their crew to be able to access the property and to allow us to have the time to review plans and the scope of work. That would include actually some level of review by the board for various things that they'll be doing. And we'll keep you engaged as those things move forward.
Okay.
But yeah, everything else is basically the same as what was in their proposal.
Great. Okay, Ken, any questions, comments? Andy?
Nope.
David?
great.
Gina?
Exciting.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you back here and be talking about this. It's good. So I will, so I'll entertain a motion to authorize the chair to execute the lease.
I so do so. I motioned for Andrew to sign the lease.
I second that.
Good. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Good luck.
Thanks so much. Okay.
All right, I am going to bounce around the agenda a bunch, until we can get someone from TAC here, so that we can have a full conversation, rather, so, I'm gonna go to meeting minutes for the last two meetings, sorry. So first up will be minutes from April 24th. So, this isn't a comment on the minutes, just a question. Are all of our meeting dates now up on the town calendar? Is that up to date with what we decided?
Oh,
at this
you mean the
meeting?
ARB's meeting?
Yeah.
Yep, everything's up to date,
Okay.
based on the changes that we made, I
Okay.
think.
I hadn't looked to do my summer calendar yet, so.
Okay, yes, everything is up to date.
Then I think I'm okay with April 24th, if anyone else had changes.
Motion to approve the minutes of April 24th, ARB minutes, 2017.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Andy, I'm gonna defer to you for May 1st, since I wasn't here.
And he did a wonderful job.
I heard.
Boy,
Thank you for stepping in
that
so
was a
short
deep
notice.
agenda. I looked at them and I think they look fine. Does anybody have any comments on them?
We had two people sitting up at the table with us. Do we know the other person's name?
We don't
Because it
know.
just says Rajwant Singh.
We
He
didn't
give
have
us
his
a
name.
Okay,
Ally Carter didn't have his name.
okay.
No,
We
and
didn't.
that was not the person who had submitted the application,
Okay.
actually. This was the person who submitted the application.
Hmm.
Okay.
So we can ask them to tell us, that's probably the most appropriate thing to do.
Yeah.
And then we'll make sure to add the name as an amendment, okay?
Did
Okay.
they resubmit?
What's that?
Did they resubmit?
No, they did not. No, we're trying to reach out to them to help them to work on the application. But we can reach out to Mr. Singh and get the name of his, who accompanied him.
Okay.
Move to accept the minutes of May 1st with the potential amendment of the second person who was at the hearing.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain. All right, good. Jenny, do you want to give your director's report?
Okay. How long?
Yeah, he'll be here soon, but he's not here yet,
Okay.
obviously. He's on his way.
We can always,
won't-
we can always
Yeah,
stop
it
and we'll
won't,
start again.
it's not a very long report, actually.
Okay.
I guess the first thing is just, how did everybody experience the online agenda with the materials? And then, the follow-up question to that is, do you want hand-delivered materials now that you're going to have them online? Because it would be helpful to know that moving forward. I wanted to make it easy this time, or easier, but I'd like to understand that for the future. And then, related to this, at a future meeting, we're gonna talk about sort of our rules for filing. And just make sure that we're all on the same page. So how did that experience work?
I wouldn't mind having, if someone submits a package in for approval, I wouldn't mind having a package. It's sometimes very difficult to print out all that stuff, because I usually like to jot down notes
Yeah.
on, drawings or whatever else. If it's online, I just don't have the ability to do that right now.
Yeah, if we have plans and maps, it's easier to have a package. This, we could have had entirely online, printed out, but we need to on our own.
Yeah, you'd be okay with that in the future,
I
like
agree
if
with-
it's not
I agree with
plans,
that, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
that'd be fine with me.
I didn't see the online version, but I'd be fine with having this kind of a packet online, but like Andrew said, if we had larger plans.
Okay. When you say you didn't see the online version, like when you clicked on the agenda, you couldn't access it?
I saw the agenda, I didn't notice that all the materials were
Yeah.
available as well.
So the way it works is that the agenda is basically a live agenda. So you can click on each agenda item, and behind that link, there are supporting documents, and it takes you to another page. Not another whole new window or anything like that, but just the next page is all of the supporting documents, just so you know.
That makes sense.
And then you can download
You
PDFs
can-
of whatever is out
Keep
there.
them.
So for the lease that we just discussed, for example, that was separate from our packet, so to go online and pull that down. I thought it was helpful.
Okay, it's just the big stuff.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, if we could just have a packet of the larger stuff and not necessarily everything, that would probably save time and money as well.
Okay.
Just plans and maps or not 8.5 by 11, be fine with me.
Okay, got it. This is the agenda I was referring to. When you see these, like, the links, you can literally click on these agenda items and it opens up to other pages.
Just the blue stuff, right?
Yeah, just the blue stuff. This one just, my copy doesn't show anything.
Yeah.
Good.
So that was that. The other thing is just, we haven't had a little mini celebration about how we worked very hard to advance many town bylaw and zoning bylaw articles for town meeting. They all were passed. We should feel very good about that. Just take the time to appreciate, first of all, the work of the staff and also the work of Andrew, speaking on behalf of the board at town meeting. Just want to thank you very much for that.
All goes to the residential study group.
And the residential study, definitely, but appreciated everybody's support during that process. And just wanted to note that we have the first reading draft of the zoning bylaw for the zoning recodification effort. We actually received it on April 25th. And we have, of course, David is serving on the zoning recodification working group. But I would like to ask all members of the ARB to be able to review that first reading draft, and we can make sure that everybody has a copy of it.
Is it online?
Yeah.
It is online, and I thought I did email it to them. I have a couple of hard copies downstairs if people want to take a hard copy. I'm not sure if I have 5, but I'll bet I have 4.
If it's online, it's online somewhere, right?
It is online, it's
Yep.
on,
Then
yeah.
that's.
And I think also I sent it to you
Okay.
around the end of April. Yeah.
What are the,
So
Yeah, we'll
the-
email you the link to where it is
The
online.
timeline right now is that we're getting comments back to RKG by the 31st
Yeah, the end
of May, so Wednesday the 31st. But of course, if you had additional comments or things that you would like to mention or note, it would be helpful for staff to know what you're thinking, or if you'd like to talk about it at a future meeting, we can also, of course, do that. This is all sort of leading to the next iteration of the draft, so we're, as you know, we're moving towards a fall special town meeting to actually get the full next draft of a zoning bylaw ready.
Well, this is going this fall, not next year?
No, not next year, yeah, a special fall town meeting this year in the fall. So
Is
the
it
public.
just for this?
Yes, it is just for this.
Oh.
Well, at the moment, it's just for this. I don't know, I'm
We'll see
not,
what happens
I'm not in
tomorrow,
charge
but-
of
Yeah, once
town
it
meeting, so
opens.
we'll
Okay.
see what else
Stuff
comes up.
comes from here.
But the public forum the first public forum that we're planning is on July 13th, which would be for everybody to, learn more about this process, to also engage in a dialogue with the consultants and staff and others committee about the second reading draft.
how do you see that being formatted?
Where the zoning recodification working group is actually going to be thinking about the format of that meeting at their next
Okay.
meeting. So we haven't talked as a group about what we want to see happen at that meeting just
Okay.
yet.
Can you ask us to go?
Yeah.
You request
Yeah.
us to be at that meeting?
I want everyone to be there if I can, be, please.
The 14th.
13th
13th.
of July.
Yeah.
So July 13th is a Thursday night here at Town Hall. I think it starts at 7. And then I just wanted to note that also town meeting appropriated $55,000 so that we can continue the zoning recodification work. That's more of the policy updates to the zoning bylaw. There's a lot of things that we talk about wanting to change. We want to do things that we talked about in the master plan. So we have a long list of things, but we'll probably prioritize and choose 3 of those things that are really important. We all have some ideas about what those top 3 things might be for ourselves, but we'll make sure that we have those conversations moving forward. And then a portion of those funds will also pay for the legal notice printing publication related to the current zoning recodification work that we're doing.
And the current work is really structural, framework, typographical, clerical.
Yes. And making it align with case law
Right.
and a legal document.
But no policy changes.
Not policy changes, not
At all.
substantive ones,
Yeah.
no. So, so there's a lot of things that I would hope that the board could also spend time discussing and planning for, and so I'm thinking that sometime during the next fiscal year, early on ideally, we could maybe have some time on a future board agenda to talk about some of those items, sort of a little retreat mode. Would that be something you're interested in doing?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll find a time at a future meeting for that, or a special meeting just for that,
Okay,
okay?
good.
And that was it.
Okay, thank you.
It's also our zoning bylaws birthday today, just letting you know.
Really?
Yes.
How old is it?
Well, it was born in 1924, so,
Oh.
you know. You just do the math.
And then have major
From that
revisions in
greatest
1974, 5.
That's right. It's part of the
Major
greatest,
surgery.
it's part of the greatest generation of zoning bylaws. Anyway, you're welcome.
All right, so right on time, Howard Muse has joined us from the Transportation Advisory Committee. Thank you for coming, Howard.
I
Appreciate having you.
apologize, Laura did ask me to come.
It's quite all right.
Lost track of it.
We're all volunteers.
Apologies.
All right, so I'll move back to item 1. I think Gene Benson had some questions for you on tax methodology.
Yeah, so thank you for doing this. I thought it was really helpful. What I didn't quite understand, Howard, and I hope you could help. It said there will be little direct impact on traffic in Arlington. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about why that was the conclusion and what traffic impact you think it would have on people going in and out of Alewife who either are driving from Arlington or taking the bus into or out of Alewife.
Yeah, couple of different things. First of all, the total traffic impact is not very large, partially because of the TDM program they have. And their analysis of traffic was based on some information they got from Bucks on 2, which is the apartment complex right next to where this is going in. And I think this is gonna be a similar type project. So they had the actual experience of that project. And the other reason that the traffic impacts are not particularly large is that there's an existing use on the site, a bowling alley and a motel. And as part of the traffic study, what they do is calculate the traffic that would be generated by the new project and subtract out the traffic that's generated by the existing use on the site, so that they come up with a net traffic impact. So that would explain why in general there's not a large traffic impact. With
Can I just
particular-
interrupt to ask, so how many morning trips and how many evening trips?
I can't tell you that off the top of my head. Do you have
To the study?
a copy of the study? I could look for it.
I do.
In one of the, I can't remember which peak hour, one of the peak hours, this impact is very small. And then the other hour, I think it's something on the order of 50 additional trips.
50.
Yes. But with regard to, I think there's 2 considerations with regard to Arlington traffic. One is direct impacts. They looked at the distribution of traffic to and from the project, and they assign it along various routes. They did not assign any traffic to Lake Street, which is, I think we made, I don't know whether we commented on that in the letter. Part of the problem, we were looking at the report after it had already been accepted by the city, so it's, we didn't focus as much on some of the methodological questions as we might have. They didn't really assign any trips directly to Lake Street, which would go up and down Lake Street between Route 2 and Mass Ave. But given that, I'm not sure that there would be a very large percentage in any case, because their traffic is either gonna be oriented to Boston and Cambridge, or trips are gonna be oriented to Boston, Cambridge, or they would be oriented to Route 2 going west out to 128, people working along 128 or in Lexington, those sorts of things. So I think it would be a very small percentage that would go along Lake Street. The biggest impact on Lake Street would be at the interchange with Route 2, where in particular traffic returning to the project from the east would have to use the interchange to make a U-turn and go back over to, I forget what they call it, but sort of the frontage road, and get back on Route 2 to get into the project. But the analysis they did of that additional traffic, along with other traffic growth in the area, indicated those intersections would still operate at good levels of service. And one thing I should say about that is that you may think they don't operate, particularly in the evening, at a good level of service. The problem is not the intersection, the problem is the backup on Lake Street, which actually backs up from the bikeway, Brook Ave, all the way to Route 2, and in fact up onto the ramp of eastbound traffic coming off and getting off of Route 2. If that backup weren't there, the traffic could move through that intersection without significant delay. And the way that the analysis is done does not really recognize the impact of that. Traffic can't get through the intersection because there's a queue in front of it. Now, obviously, for that particular location, it might add some traffic there, but again, that's in the evening, and that's going in the opposite direction of the traffic going back to the project that would go through that interchange. The other comment or question is about sort of impacts to people from Arlington and elsewhere trying to get to Alewife. And I would add to that, people trying to get through the intersection of Mass Ave and Alewife Parkway, which is also quite congested, both in the morning and the evening. So people that are trying to do those things, and I think in our letter we actually talk about, and I forget what the name, it's evidently called Steel Street, I didn't know that. But the intersection where the bikeway comes in, going to Alewife Station, the ramp going out to Route 2, Steel Street, it's a very congested location because of a mix of pedestrians, bikes, cars, and buses. And it's a bit of a free-for-all. So any additional traffic going through there obviously is going to add to the congestion. Whether it's including bikes and pedestrians, because if people are going to Alewife on their bikes or walking, they're going to go, I think they're pretty much going to go through that same location as cars would that are coming from the project. So there's some addition of traffic there. Again, it's a very congested location, and it's an additional small level of additional traffic through there, both vehicles and people walking and bikes. But I would not, I know it's hard to call it a significant impact, I guess. I'm not sure that people are gonna be able to perceive the difference in what's happening there.
Why do you say that? Because there'll be so few people, or because the intersection is so terrible already?
Well, it's a little bit of a combination of both. One of the things they do, and the same thing is true at Mass Ave and Alewife Parkway. You add a few vehicles in there to an already very congested location. When they do their traffic analysis, it's a level of service F, and it stays at level of service F.
Right.
So that you don't really get that, I'm trying to find those numbers that you were asking me about. So that I'm not sure at any one location, you're really seeing a lot of additional traffic.
So
Oh.
while you're looking, one of the things that I mentioned before you got here was, I used to go through into Alewife all the time to go to work. Now I go through maybe once every week or two, and it's always backed up way onto Route 2. In fact, the last time I had to go into Boston, I had to drive because I had to get back and get my car, couldn't take the bus. The traffic was backed up to Lake Street on Route 2
Yes.
to get into Alewife, and I think that's a semi-common occurrence anyhow. And one of the things that I noticed two things that I noticed. One is, despite the rules, people still took a shortcut and went around the other way and cut in the line. But the other thing is, so many bicycles and pedestrians were at that intersection, I guess Steel Street or whatever it is, that traffic was always having to stop there
Yes.
to allow the pedestrians and the bicyclists to cross. And I noted that and there's a lot of wonderful mitigation in here that they've proposed, I think, for transportation demand management. And much of it is to get people to get to Alewife without driving, which makes sense, but it seemed to me that that would increase the congestion at that intersection.
Yes.
And there was no mitigation whatsoever in their proposal for that piece of it. There was a lot of, let's get people out of their cars and let's give them a lot of other options and let them use shuttle buses and, and bike share and all those other sorts of, car share and all those other sort of good things. But there was zero mitigation for what would be a large increase in pedestrians and bicyclists going from there to Alewife. And I wondered whether there was any potential mitigation that we would suggest to them.
Well, did they even analyze whether there would be a significant impact from the additional, essentially, crossings of the access road at the Steel Place intersection by additional bicyclists and pedestrians?
Yeah, there was no analysis of it and no discussion that I saw of any mitigation at that location. But I agree that given the amount of people, one of the reasons the traffic isn't so large is that they're encouraging people to walk and bike to the station, and that's basically a choke point. Almost everybody coming from the west has to go through there in order to get to the station.
Can I ask one question? You guys are bringing up really good points, but how does that have anything, I mean, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to diminish those points you put out, but how I see it is, this has been approved by Cambridge already.
Yeah.
And so what do we have to voice our concerns that something's I mean, these are points you bring up. Hopefully, I wish they were brought up at the Cambridge hearing, and maybe they were, maybe they weren't, I don't know. But what can we do as a group here to either make some changes so they address some of these issues, or is it too far down the line where we just say, hey, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is.
And partially in answer to that, and get back to the question you asked me about mitigation, sort of off the top of my head, or I go through there a number of times, not every day, but a number of times, and every time I go through there, I cannot think of what could be done short of putting in a pedestrian bridge or tunnel, which
Who's
most
gonna
people
walk
might
up and
not
down?
use. I mean, in a location like that, people aren't gonna go up and over and back down unless somehow you block their way completely.
Plus, you need a lot of real estate to make it ADA compliant.
Yes, and I don't even know that you would have, I mean, you might, but, and it would be a very expensive proposition. So I think the only thing about raising a point about that intersection as it pertains to Arlington is that people from Arlington who are already going through that location now will experience a more congested location. Whether that's a significant enough impact to raise concerns about the project, I don't know.
Thank you, Howard.
Oh, and just real quick, it's actually the evening peak hour when there's very little added traffic from the project, because the bowling alley is busy at that time.
But
In the
what's
morning, there's about 51 outbound vehicles, and actually a decline in inbound vehicles. So it's a net of about 40 vehicles altogether, but 50 in the peak direction.
Which is the peak direction, do they think? Well,
Exiting the project onto Route 2 and then finding their way to various places. If they want to go out west
Yes,
on
they
Route
have to
2, they
go
have to
on
go
that
back
route.
through the they have to go
the
through
one
the
we
intersection
just talked
we've
about.
just been talking about.
Right.
So they would add some traffic to that location, as well as people going to the T station.
Thank you.
What, can I ask one
Go ahead.
related question? They also talked in their permit, and I don't know if you looked at this, about allowing them to reduce the amount of parking spaces. And, I mean, that makes sense if you want people not to have cars. But one of the things they said is, well, if they have guests and visitors, they can park in the LF parking garage, which allows parking for up to, I think, 7 days. And I guess since the LF parking garage usually is filled by like 10 in the morning, and you can't park there, I wonder if they looked at sort of that impact also.
I didn't see anything about that in
Okay.
the report.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board? I know we had a couple questions from the audience. Sir, could you state your name and address?
My name is Michael Brandon. I live at 277 Pines Avenue in North Cambridge. I'm the clerk for the North Cambridge Stabilization Committee. I was going to respond to some of the questions that the board members have based on my knowledge from having tracked this project, had the developer present several times to our group before you went to the city. Before you kick that off, I wanted to say to Jennifer that I really did appreciate, I didn't realize this was your first time on the electronic agenda, but I found it very useful and very helpful. So I hope you will continue with that. On the issue of was the board notified of the special permit? At the previous meeting here, Jennifer said she didn't remember seeing anything about this project, but she does usually get a lot of communications, but she couldn't locate any. I believe, and I saw the records request. What that purports to be is, what it is a certified copy of the assessors, what they describe as the abutters list. I haven't looked at it closely to see if it also includes the abutters to the abutters. It clearly doesn't include people across Mass Ave, directly opposite the public way, who would be in Arlington. That's not in their list. And the statute requires that they certify the parties in interest, not just the abutters, but all the parties in interest. So I think there are, certainly flaws in Cambridge's procedure for notifying. Also in this case, there should have been 2 separate notices that came because there were 2 hearings. First hearing was continued not to a date certain, so it had to be re-advertised and presumably re-noticed. Whether that happens is not clear. So there is a sheet of standard sheet of governmental agencies that are supposed to get all of these notices, and it's clearly a mailing sheet. Whether that went out is not clear. One way to find out might be to check with Watertown and Belmont who also abut, and see, did they receive it, or was there, a mistake made? But that alone would, I hope, be a reason for this board, because you clearly didn't get actual notice until it's too late unless you appeal, which I do hope you will do. The question about when that is, the planning board's decision was filed with the city clerk on the 4th of the month, and there are 20 days, the 3rd of the month. It's the 23rd, basically a week from now, that you have for town council to draft an initial complaint, file it with either land court or superior court, Middlesex, and also has to file a notice with a copy with the Cambridge City Clerk. That's strictly enforced, so if you sit on your rights, you can't control anything. As far as, Mr. Lau said, it's a done deal. It's true, until the permit is if you appeal, the case could be settled. Perhaps, they agree to amend to include the additional traffic mitigation that you folks discussed, that the TAC suggested some issues. But until that appeal is settled or resolved by the court, it's not a done deal. On the issue of the traffic study, please keep in mind that it was done by the proponent of the project. I mean, they hire them. Cambridge does not, or at least in this case, they didn't, and usually they don't, but hire an independent consultant. Public and others who are familiar with the area were not involved in the scoping of that study, although the city's traffic department did. And some of our citizen experts, I would call them, and some are engineers, find fault with some of the methodology in the study. And some of the conclusions. The Cambridge Planning Board tends to just rely on what their staff tells them, what the traffic department tells them. If they certify that the study is reliable. But again, it has assumptions like the level of service at intersections. Well, most of the intersections, some that you discussed, and others are already level F. So the developer always says, well, we're not making it any worse. But what happens is, that you can't get cars through it any faster, but what happens when that happens? You start to get road rage. We have cars coming through our neighborhoods. I don't know up at Lake Street, I've never really observed how it works, but I suspect you're gonna get people cutting through there. And this is a landlocked location, as far as road infrastructure. And to me, it doesn't make sense to continue to allow this gradual increase. And each project, also keep in mind that the box that on 2 that provided some of the information is owned by, it's the same developer. So, as far as how reliable is their information is not clear. Also, if they're not going to be generating traffic, and they claim that people are going to ride bikes and use the T. Well, it's not that close to the T, actually. They're calling it the Residence at Alewife Station. But to get to it, you have to walk 15 minutes. And currently...
I can walk faster than that.
Okay. I can't. But there was talk in their proposal of providing money to pave part of the pathway there. But that apparently is contingent on a different abutter, the Cambridge Discovery Park, agreeing to that.
DCR.
Hmm?
DCR, I think, has to agree.
Yes, it could be too. I mean, that raises a whole other issue of the impacts on the reservation. What this constant development, enclosing large development, enclosing the reservation, what impacts that's having. And then there's the big issue of the flooding, which is a terrible problem now. And Cambridge has done a multi-year climate vulnerability assessment. And they're in the process now of, they know how bad it's going to be. What the developers say, and this is several of them, all the ones along Cambridge Park Drive, well, we're going to build it on stilts, so it'll be above the floodplain and, water can flow. But there are not provisions, for instance, if there's a winter storm, or if we get a bad winter, and there are snow banks, the water's not going to be able to flow freely under the building as they maintain. Also, you had mentioned 2070. One of the things our group was trying to do was get them to design it to they did a 2030 scenario and a 2070, those years. And so they've designed it so their building will be above, a foot above in 2030, but 2070, they get inundated, as does like Route 2. I don't know if you saw on your Arlington site a depiction of, based on the actual predicted levels, how much of the area will be flooded. That's without this building being shown because it's not there now. So in the 2070 scenario, what they plan to do, or say they will do, is have people shelter in place, because there's not going to be any way for emergency vehicles to evacuate them. Shelter in place, and they will put floodgates around the lower level, which means that water, because it's in the floodway, it's not just in the floodplain where the water spreads out to, it's where the water is naturally seeking to flow away in a severe storm. So by blocking that with floodgates, it's going to make potential flooding in Arlington worse. And I would hope that at least you'd give your Conservation Commission a chance to read what the Cambridge Commission did. And they looked at it very narrowly because it has to do with the Wetlands Act. And I'll say I'm taking too much time, so I'll wind down. And if Madeline Astor, who wrote the letter, I think she wanted to make a few comments, and I'll just glance at my notes and see if there's anything else. And I'm happy to provide documents, the hydrological studies, the order of conditions. Another group, the Arlington, Belmont, Cambridge, has a joint group to address the regional flooding that affects all of the communities. And I don't think they, examine this or weighed in on this. So what we have is all these individual projects that Cambridge, they've never denied one, adds, and each one says, well, we're not doing it, but then incrementally, through a cumulative impact, it's making a situation that's not tenable now in terms of flooding, in terms of traffic, and we believe it's going to make it worse. Now, maybe if you appeal, you can get a better look at what's going on Lake Street and this intersect. By the way, the intersection on Steel Place, it was recently renamed Steel Place because there was so much confusion. It was called something similar to Cambridge, it had another Cambridge Park in its name. So it's Steel Place now. But just so you know, at the corner of Cambridge Park Drive and Steel Place, there's an existing building that has gotten a special permit to add 3 floors and change the configuration so that the traffic into the garage and the project will be on Steel Place instead of the current curb cut on Cambridge Park Drive. So I don't know if that's gonna help the situation. The state, by the way, and Representative, now Senator Will Brownsberger and others have had Mass Highway out looking at it, trying to figure out what can be done. And there are some changes that were made at the Route 2 Alewife Brook Parkway intersection to try to make it a little safer, but it's basically, yeah, you can't get through there. I'll shut up. Sorry.
Thank you.
But thank you for indulging me.
Thank you.
Can I ask one question?
Go ahead.
These points you bring up and these concerns, did you bring these up at the Cambridge hearing?
Oh, yes. In
And
fact,
were they not addressed at the hearing there?
well, maybe Mal wouldn't say it because she was there, but no, they limit the public to 3 minutes. I can send you the, and you can see why, but I can
Good idea, let's.
yeah. Thank you for your indulgence. When you revise your rules, look at that. No, there were fairly elaborate letters similar to what you received, outlining the various issues. Oh, what the other big issue, or another big issue was the proponents, the developer and the owner, did not disclose the fact that it's a brownfield site and that there's currently an amended activity and use limitation on the deed imposed at the direction of Mass Environmental Development, Department of Environmental Protection, that prohibits soil disturbance, gardening, playgrounds, and residential use. So we brought this up at the second hearing because one of our people looked in the records and there it was. They never mentioned it. Wasn't mentioned to the Conservation Commission, I don't think. And it's not clear whether it can be mitigated sufficiently to allow it. And that's just on one portion of the lot that had an auto body shop on it. The rest of the lot, which I imagine in the old days was had other industrial uses, has not been subjected to a full initial assessment, so it's not clear what's there, but they're assuming that it'll be okay. The city's response, the planning board's response was not to, want to look into that or ask about it, but they said, oh, well, some of them are architects. They said, well, I know that, the state will make them clean it up, so it's not an issue for them. So it's frustrating, but yes, we did raise a lot of these issues. We weren't satisfied with the response to this, but we don't have standing to sue. I mean, we're not in a butter, and we're not a government agency, but I would just hope that you will at least protect your right to pursue it by filing on time, and then, You can look at it more comprehensively. But I don't think you were, I suspect that you in fact were not notified, and that alone, or at least the questions, would give you standing to challenge in court.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
This person, oh, okay. I would
Name and
like-
address, please.
Oh, Madeline Astor, 67 Rice Street, Cambridge. I would like to ask I didn't catch his name, a few questions, if that's all right?
Oh, Howard Muir, Transportation. Sure. Briefly, please.
Yeah, Howard, a couple of things. I stood out there last week and looked at what was going on there, and I saw that people would take Lake Street to avoid the traffic right next to Alewife. So I can't see how that isn't going to affect it, because it was backed up all the way behind the box, and the guy who worked there told me that goes on every single day. But my question was, did that study also take into account the 500-car garage that's going in there, and that other new site, which is about half the size of the Forrester building?
There were a number of projects that were identified
Okay,
as what in the business they call background development.
okay,
And they were included in what was called the 2021 build analysis.
okay.
I can't answer specifically whether those particular projects you mentioned were there, but there was a fairly long list of developments included in that analysis,
All right.
including the one in Belmont that's currently under construction.
All right, so I just wanted to comment that, Mr. Lau, one of the things, when we did bring up this traffic issue, the director of parking, is it director of parking, is he called director of transportation, got up and
Yeah,
said he thought
transportation.
that it would actually make it better to have more traffic there. I know, we didn't get it either. But I want to speak more to the issue of it's a cumulative effect. When you start getting all of these projects together, that each one is adding more to it. And what I saw when I stood out there last week is it's already at overcapacity, and there has to be some kind of mitigation. Also, I don't know, my opinion is that it's a regional issue, and that your planning board should be working with them with anything that's going to affect Arlington, especially the traffic. I talk to commuters who come into Alewife every day. They say they sit for a half an hour to get in and park. Then at night they sit in for another half an hour. And they said they can't see how there could be even one more car in the system, let alone these cumulative effects. And also in their master plan now, Cambridge is planning to build up to 4,300 more units out there. Alewife is where they're gonna put all the rest of their development. That's where they think they have the space. So I think now is the time to say, wait, should we maybe look at this together and see how this is really gonna affect us? There should be, if there isn't any way to mitigate it, then is the answer to add more now, and then later on when it gets so bad, it's gonna be even more expensive to try to deal with? Those are my comments.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Steve.
Steve Rebelak, 111 Sunnyside Avenue. Sunnyside Avenue is in East Arlington. It runs roughly parallel to the Alewife Brook. Most of my street is in FEMA Zone AE, which is the 1% flood risk zone. And just to make a long story short, whenever the Alewife Brook floods, so do we. So in terms of flood mitigation, I was actually pretty happy with what I saw in the Cambridge Planning Board's decision. Specifically, item, the list of items under 8 on page 23. So, they are, from what I've understood by reading this, the first floor of the building will be elevated 1 foot above the 2030 estimated 1% flood zone. And, in any residential apartments will be above the 2070 100-year base flood elevation. They're doing, equal mitigation on site and increasing the amount of pervious surface. Given, overall I'm happy with that. What that says is they're building on top of they're basically building out of the floodplain by virtue of height. Now, I agree with the gentleman over here, so what happens in 2070? To me, the real issue in 2070, and the Cambridge's climate change vulnerability assessment talks about this, is actually the Amelia Earhart Dam. The
Yes.
Amelia Earhart Dam is essentially flood mitigation for the entire Mystic and Alewife watershed. Before a big storm, they basically drain the Mystic River and pump it out into the ocean. Now, at 2030, up till 2030, the Amelia Earhart Dam will serve its purpose of holding the water back during a 100-year storm. After 2070, it will do that not so much. So a 2070 flood that tops the Amelia Earhart Dam will put us underwater.
Yeah,
So
excuse me, that's been moved up though to 2040, hasn't it?
I don't know.
I'm pretty certain it has
Mhm.
been.
So I mean, from my, as someone who lives right in this floodplain, if I live to be 100, I fully expect my house to wind up under a bridge in Medford someplace. And I don't know, I don't see any real way of mitigating that, other than making, say, a conscious effort to undevelop. Is that a word?
Yeah.
The area.
Thank you.
I'd just like to state
Yes, ma'am.
my name, Jeanette Cummings, 32 Dorothy Road, East Arlington, and I'm here on behalf of the Coalition to Save the Megar Wetlands, and would also urge the group to take a stance in this. We just have, the traffic and the flooding is an ongoing issue, and we have accidents within our neighborhood on Dorothy Road continuously by traffic coming off of Lake Street to avoid the traffic.
Thank you.
Just one more thing, I would just urge the board to go out there, in the back, behind box, during rush hour, and just take a look at it. You just get the feel that it's at overcapacity and it really needs to be addressed somehow.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thoughts, comments? Gene, start there.
I agree with Steve. I think that when it comes to floodwaters and flood mitigation, it's going to be better afterward than it is now. We have to understand that it's a currently developed site. It's all full of impervious surface now, asphalt. And at least, I mean, I didn't read all the plans, but from reading the City of Cambridge Planning Board decision, I think that it will either not be worse or even be a little better afterward. Now, I may be wrong, I'm just reading their decision, and they wrote the decision to justify it. But I don't see flooding as something that is going to be increased, at least on reading this.
I think I agree with that
Yeah.
perspective.
You know, on the traffic, I really don't know what the answer is. I think that there is going to be more traffic, although, you know, if their numbers are correct, it's not going to be that much more traffic. You have problems with backup at Lake Street now in evening rush hour because people fill up that intersection, you know, you can't get through, so I understand there'll be more of that. There'll be some more traffic in the morning, and I think the biggest problem may simply be people biking and walking and going across, what's it called, Steel Street or Steel Avenue?
Steel place.
Steel
Steel
Place,
Place.
whatever it is, plus people who are driving west from there because they may be working out in the 128 corridor, having to do that loop at the same time. So I don't know what we do about that. I think it has a really big impact on Arlington residents, and theoretically on some Arlington traffic because of how the traffic backs up sometimes. So I'm not sure what we can do about that. I don't know if there's any really good mitigation. Howard didn't know if there's any really good mitigation for that, but it's not having any mitigation just means you're going to accept worse and worse. You know, you can't give F- and G's and stuff like that. But if you've ever taught, you know that, you know, somebody fails by a little bit and some other people are failing by a lot, and it's a lot worse. You know, so I don't know what we would do about that. I wouldn't be opposed to asking the town council to take a look and see whether there's a cause of action related to the traffic impacts, and whether, you know, filing would allow us to get to the table. But if we can't identify any additional mitigation, I'm not sure if there's anything we can really do about it. So that's what I'm thinking now.
Thanks, Gene. Those are all excellent points. David?
Yeah, I would just echo Gene, you know, based on the information that we have in front of us, I can't say that that the flooding concerns that some of the community members have expressed are supported by what's in Cambridge's decision. You know, they seem to have considered flooding issues, and the conditions they've placed on here seem appropriate. You know, I hear the traffic issues. I am concerned about it, and I don't know that Cambridge necessarily studied all of the potential impacts adequately. But again, their conclusions, based on what they did study, were that the impacts would be small. And yes, I do know that congestion all around that area is very bad right now. I've been through it on foot, on bike, and by car many times. But even if this project were to make it worse, I'm not sure. I also don't have any good ideas about how to mitigate that. I think if we had something in front of us that gave us even a substantial concern that this project would either present a significant risk of increased flooding in Arlington or significantly impact traffic in Arlington, I'm just not sure
I'm not seeing
what we can do
either.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Andy?
So Howard, is it, if you're going west on Route 2, you're coming to the site, Lanes and Games, or the new project, you have to swing around Lake, right?
If you're coming from the
You're
west?
coming down Fresh Pond, and you're heading
Oh,
out Route
okay.
2, but you're going to your home at the new project next to Vox.
Right, you have to get off at
Have to
Lake
swing around
Street.
Lake.
Right,
There's no other way to get,
but you're only on just a short segment of Lake Street. And in the
Getting-
evening, you're going the opposite direction of where the real backup is, which is going towards Mass Ave.
don't you have to, oh, so you're saying, but with the backup, you have to, you're stopped by the backup by getting to get
There's
around.
a traffic signal there. So if you're coming off the ramp, you get a green signal, you can take a left turn, and then you can take another left turn
I think at the
next
bottom
signal.
of the ramp, it's actually 2 lanes.
So you can make the left without,
Most of the time, unless some guy's in the middle. But
right,
generally, if
Yeah,
you're
see, it
I-
splits off there.
Yeah,
and then you
I've
make
gone,
a-
I used to, when I worked, I went through there all the time, and
This is
people
the ramp.
you take
never
the left
really
where?
blocked the ramp that I
Then
was
you
aware
pull
of.
up here and you take the left.
it's a wide ramp, so.
Yeah, but you're taking a left, but the whole lake is packed. Can you really get?
But you're going in
Well,
the
unless
other
they're-
direction,
if
going
they're-
in the other
I
direction.
mean, it's blocked going all the
Well,
way.
are they blocking the intersection of Lake and the ramp?
I've never seen
It's
it.
possible, I've never seen it, there's a traffic signal there,
Yeah.
and I don't think people block.
If you're coming,
If they get stuck partway into the intersection, it's wide enough that any car can get around it, I think.
if you're coming from Pleasant and you're going down, to get to Lake,
Right,
that gets packed all the way up. So
Yes.
now I got people coming off, and they're getting blocked by a kind of a constant stream backing up on Lake. There's no way to get around to avoid that. You have to take the left, excuse me, take the left and get back up.
If they're coming from the west,
Yeah,
they would take the ramp that takes you to Lake Street to go
Right.
over to Mass Ave,
right.
but then they take a left right there.
But to take that left, they have to cross traffic.
No,
That's- I'm just looking at it here.
yeah, no, actually, I'm wrong. They would actually have to go to the foot of the ramp
Yeah.
and make a U-turn to get back onto Route 2.
Right, they have to take a left on Lake.
But if they're coming from the west, they just go straight to the project. They don't-
Yeah, but I'm coming home from it, I'm going Fresh Pond and I wanna go home and I'm driving.
But you take the off-ramp at Lake Street.
Yeah.
You take a left turn.
Right,
If you're taking a right turn, you're going into the queue
I
of
got it.
cars that are backed up. If you're going left, there's no queue there.
except it's queued all the way around from Pleasant.
Huh?
People are backed up from Pleasant Street all the way around.
Yeah, but you're saying that they're stopped in the middle of the light and block traffic.
Yeah.
I've gone through that
Yeah.
intersection a lot. That's,
Yeah.
I live a couple blocks from there, okay?
It's doable at that point.
I've never seen it.
Because, I mean, there's
You're
a,
going against traffic, you're going against the flow of traffic at that point.
there's a signal, at both lefts that they would
Yeah,
be
yeah, I
making.
see.
So there's a signal
Yeah, you
here,
can-
and there's a
yeah, you're
signal
right. You
here.
can
But
get
you're
to
right, though, it is backed up all
All the way to
through.
Pleasant Street.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it's just
So-
crazy, but it's, but
I mean,
you,
if-
you can,
Yeah, and there's no other way to get to your site driving from the east to the west.
And
There's no
again,
other back way to get in there.
and again, that's.
You can't even get there if you go along Cambridge Park Drive, you can't.
No, you
There's no
can't.
connection.
The railroad tracks.
So they've created a whole
Separated.
land chunk that has no other egress except for
Yeah.
Route 2.
Yeah. But again,
That's right.
what was the evening peak projected to be net gain?
It was something like 5 vehicles exiting
Yeah.
and virtually nothing entering because
How
right
can
now
there
you
be
have a
that few
bowling
if
alley.
everybody's driving home, which there will be enough people that are not.
But they're netting out the traffic that exists
Yeah.
at the bowling alley, and the bowling alley attracts a lot of traffic.
Yeah, but that bowling alley is already, it's gotta go east and then somehow swing back around to go west.
The bowling alley has the same access as the project would.
Yeah, I know, but I'm talking about people going home through Fresh Pond and they have to go around Lake to get back to their site.
That's right. And
But that's
people going to the bowling
And if
alley
people are
have to
coming
do
from
the
the
same
bowling alley.
thing.
Yeah, exactly, but they first have to go east and then somehow swing back around and get over.
So the net result is very little change in
Yeah.
traffic.
Yeah, because the bowling
I
alley's
believe you,
gone.
but I
Yeah.
know it's hard to believe that. I'm just wondering if there is any recourse for the town to say, yeah, Lake Street is a disaster. And you can't build your project, let's say, I'm being extreme, without addressing what the current condition of Lake Street is.
I think you would have a lot of problem making that argument because in the evening, the project isn't gonna generate traffic going on Lake Street toward Mass Ave. People are coming home to the project.
They're taking, yeah, I understand, they're not going that direction.
Right.
Well, Howard,
Yes.
because you're saying, how do you know they're not going to be commuting in a different direction?
Well, if they're going east, then.
We're talking about the evening peak hour, which is when Lake Street backs up all the way from, for
Right.
sake of argument, say from Mass Ave to Route 2.
Mm-hmm.
People coming back to the project would not be on that stretch of Lake Street.
No matter which direction they're coming from, are you saying?
If they're coming from Burlington or something like that.
If they're coming from Burlington, they just stay on Route 2.
Yeah, they don't-
Right
they're
into the
not-
They
project.
take 128 to Route 0 there. Yeah, It's, I don't wanna get too far down this
Yeah.
rabbit hole
Yeah.
in hypotheticals, but I think we've gotten there. Thank you. Ken?
I find right now very difficult decisions to figure out what do we have that would justify a suit. I guess that would be it, right? We'd have to sue Cambridge, and I'm not sure. I feel like we have enough something to sue with.
So, I can look at it from a similar perspective, having sued plenty of people.
Okay.
You need a justifiable cause of action and a reason to go after. I think we do have standing. I don't think we have a justifiable cause of action. I don't believe that there's enough of an impact, enough of a concrete impact, as David said, a substantive impact on Arlington to justify a lawsuit against a neighboring community for a decision that really is well thought out and takes into consideration a number, excuse me, a number of the things that we're considering here. There will be some traffic impact, sure. I think based on what they're recommending here and the change in the site, we will see an improvement in the flood conditions. And I tend to agree with Gene and with Steve that there's bigger problems with flooding than what about here. You also want to look at this as a lawsuit as having some sort of desired outcome. And I don't know what that is. We can't come to the table with anything that we're looking at for mitigation, for changes. I don't think there's any real desired outcome for the town here, aside from saying no, no, no. I don't think we can get there. So I would recommend against taking any kind of action. I don't think there's enough there to justify it.
I would agree with you in terms of filing suit, but I think Arlington should somehow address, say, look, these measures that were recommended by TAC, it does make a difference to us, the amount of traffic on there.
So
Tell us, we want to be, part of the monitoring of a key artery that affects both towns, one on either side. And
So
we're asking for that. I'm not filing suit.
one of their
I'm saying,
conditions is for, as part of the transportation demand management program, I believe, is to work with the Alewife Transportation Management Association. Do we have any seat on that? Do we have any
Yep,
input on
We
that?
can,
We do.
yes.
Can we work through those channels to input some of what TAC has had to say to not only this project, but the TMA as a whole?
We can discuss it with them. Maybe I would want to outline a little bit more what it is you would.
I
Want them to
I
do.
know, and I'm not asking for anything concrete now. I
Yeah.
think what I'm seeking out alternatives for us to have some sort of voice in this as it moves forward. And I know that TAC has made some recommendations, that we've come up with some ideas as far as TDM, that we'd like to see this particular project implement, but I think it is a community, and there are a lot of other projects in the pipeline to come down there. It does make sense for Arlington to have a voice on that committee, to make sure that we're not adversely impacted.
Well, they will be doing a significant amount of monitoring and reporting on mode split and traffic impacts. And so I think that Arlington should stay in that loop and
Absolutely.
keep track of it. Because, I mean, they base their projections, at least in part, on the experience to date with Voxon 2. If I think similarly, we should definitely monitor what ends up happening with this project and hope that their projections are not far off the mark. If they are, though, I think that would give us great concern as these additional projects in the pipeline come up for permitting. But I mean, right now, based on the evidence that we have in front of us,
Yeah, but I'm going with you. What's the channel that would allow us to get to the table as more and more of this starts to happen?
Yeah, because right now, once you begin to talk about a lawsuit, you're already behind the game.
I'm not in-
You're
I'm
far
not
behind the
in-
game, and that's kind of where we sit now. But if we can identify these channels and have a seat and a voice at the table in these meetings, then many of the traffic concerns that exist now will begin to be addressed, or at least considered.
and we could participate in the public process on future projects.
Right.
I'd like to know what that might be, what channels those are, how to, for instance, get this letter, tax letter, into something that says, yeah, we do want to know how that's working. We want to make sure, we think they're 40 trips, but we already have a disaster on Lake Street, so increments matter to us. We want to be at the table. We heard at Mugar that there were no traffic impacts, okay? So, it's all, nobody's got any traffic impacts, but we all have to live with this joint condition that borders our 2 towns, our 3 towns. So, I'd like a suggestion, I don't know what the answer is, but how to do what Andrew was saying, to get to the table in the future, to be a part of those discussions ahead of time. Whether it be, I don't know what you suggested, that particular vehicle, but maybe Jennifer, you could.
Sure.
Yeah, I think we can identify those.
My suggestion would be definitely the Alewife TMA would be one route. That's more on the monitoring end of the TDM work, so I feel like that's a longer term sort of journey. But I think in the short term, contact with the Department of Community Development, or Community Development Department rather, the Department of Traffic, Parking and Transportation. Those would be 2 places where I can, of course, make points of contact and share any information from this board so that it then is shared with any respective boards in Cambridge. And then I would just say that in the future, if we want to be working more closely with Cambridge on any large-scale development that borders, is on our boundary, that we can, continue those conversations. I think, though, that that's a little higher up than me. I think that it might be worthwhile to have our town manager engage in a conversation with their city manager, and maybe even engage the town administrator in Belmont in a conversation about ways that the communities can work together on things that relate to the 3 communities, since it was referenced that there is that flood control group, which I'm aware of. There's also, there are other smaller partnerships among the communities, but I think that would be another way in. And then the last thing I would say is they are in the midst of the master planning process. Those are meetings that are open to anybody, and that if people wanted to participate in that process and learn more about, research and reports and studies that they've been looking at in order to make recommendations for 20 to 30 years into the future, now is the time for us to weigh in on those things. So those are the suggestions I have. That was more than 3.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think go ahead, Gene.
I would like us to look into where they are in getting the new MassDOT permit and be able to participate if there's any sort of public comment period on that. Because we may be able to make some of our concerns known to MassDOT through that process, as well as to the city of Cambridge and the developer. So I'm not sure how we can do that, but there must be some sort of public process for permits, so I would guess there's one for that, but I don't know. So I think that would be really helpful to do. Second, I think we should send a letter, but I don't think Howard's letter is the right letter for us to send, because I don't think it exactly makes the points that we want to make about this, and I think the points are somewhat in Howard's letter, but I don't like a letter that says we'll found those little direct impact on traffic in Arlington. I would like a letter that says we think there will be impact on Arlington residents going in and out of Alewife. And so that's why I don't think Howard's is exactly the right letter for us, but I think we can reframe it based on the discussion and send that and identify a couple of things that Howard and TAC identified, especially that intersection where we can't figure out what mitigation is, and maybe some smart people can put their heads together and actually come up with some options. The one that occurred to me...
The Steel Road intersection?
Yeah, the Steel Road intersection. What that occurred to me, thinking about is, so people coming on the bikeway are on the left side of whatever that on-ramp is, and people coming from Fox on 2 and this place are on the right side of that road. And the problem is they're all crossing at the same place. If you didn't let them cross until they got right in front of, the T-stop, not the T-stop, but the entrance to go downstairs, you'd be preventing them from crossing in front of the first round of traffic that goes that way. I don't know if that would work, but it would have the potential to maybe have less people crossing. I'm not sure, but I mean, just in sort of, you
I think
know,
that's worth looking into.
so, you know.
Yeah,
I'm being very familiar with exactly what you're talking about.
So I think, I think we need a different letter based on this and asking them if we could meet with their transportation department. I don't know who's doing the meeting, maybe TAC, to try to work out some of these sorts of things.
I agree, it would be worth, letting them know we think there should be more examination of whether there is a better solution to people crossing. Because people are crossing two legs of that, at least two legs of that intersection simultaneously.
Right.
Although there are people who are crossing from the box on two side, who actually do need to cross there to continue along behind the station to
Right.
get to the Alewife linear
Right.
path and the Somerville community path if they're going in that
They
direction.
may have to take
So, it's complicated,
It is
but
complicated.
definitely deserves a closer look.
Okay. I think we're at a point where we should probably vote.
What are we voting on?
Right, what are we
To
voting
take
on?
no action, or to.
I don't think you're voting on anything.
I don't think we need to vote on anything.
No, but maybe could we put this on an agenda in the next, to identify specific things that we can, points of, people to address, action plan for.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need a vote, but how do we get, how do we get the letter to Cambridge Transportation?
Well, so I think we've
Hopefully this-
decided as a board that we will not be filing a lawsuit.
Right,
And
but
that's,
how do,
we don't need to vote on that,
Right.
that's clear.
Right.
I think we put on a future agenda item an action plan for moving forward, to have some contact with the people managing transportation over there. I think we have to find out who the appropriate parties are to get in touch with.
If it's town
We-
manager.
we
or
can
town-
figure that out.
Yeah,
We can
that's
figure that out.
pretty-
So why don't we do this? Why don't we table this discussion for now with the idea that it'll come on within the next some point, either the next meeting or the following meeting, to move forward on.
Let me just ask for a clarification, please. Okay, an action plan or a letter, is that what you're looking for? And if it's a letter, could I suggest that we might draft something and bring it to a future meeting and then we could discuss it? As I think we have a lot of information just from this
Mhm.
discussion as
Yeah.
to what might be in that letter, including follow-up steps. And maybe perhaps I can correspond with Adam Chapdelaine
Right.
and think about sort
think
of
that makes
other
sense.
pathways
Yeah,
for
yeah.
conversation with Cambridge.
and maybe try to find out where they are on the curb cut.
Well,
If you
I
try.
don't know that we're gonna, I mean, the decision is clearly notes that there's a process here, but we can
Right.
find
Find
out
out
what
where
that,
they
Yeah.
what that looks like,
Yeah.
and if there's a
Right.
hearing, I guess, was your main question about that?
Right, is there a place for
Okay,
input,
Right.
basically?
that seems like just another point in the potentially this letter. So would that be an acceptable, rather than make it into a?
I think that's good
I
for the
agree.
next.
Is that what
discussion.
you were
Kind of what I
looking
meant.
for?
I
Yeah.
Okay, not,
Yeah.
as I was just trying to understand.
No, we didn't
Okay,
need any
alright.
point plan to tackle
It's
Cambridge.
just,
Hitting on all the.
no, it's more
I
like
mean, I'm
just
down with that.
understanding in the
Just to make
future
it-
how we can more effectively engage in the ongoing development
Mhm.
on the Cambridge side of
Well,
our
that,
life.
to me, that seems like a longer conversation, not necessarily appropriate for
Right.
the letter that we're gonna write. That
Oh,
we
yeah,
might
not
be
the
able to
letter.
think
I
about.
think
Start with the letter.
that's a
Directors of
town
departments.
manager level
Yeah.
decision, not a redevelopment
Two, yeah,
board.
but two separate things, I agree.
Yeah.
The
Okay.
letter's about, the concerns that we noted that
Right.
didn't arise to the level of filing a
Mhm.
lawsuit.
Yeah.
And then the longer term, how do we work better with Cambridge as development continues there?
Right.
Okay,
Okay,
Good.
yes.
good. That's it for our agenda. As
Motion adjourned?
gentlemen as it was this evening.
Motion adjourned?
So I have a second.
I second that.
All in favor?
I
Aye. Thank you.